So where do we typically find leaks in buildings? Well, you can see it on the drawing here. It's typically at a junction. So for example, the floor to wall junction, the window to wall junction, the wall to roof junction, and also where you have any services penetrating. So it could be plumbing or electrical services. Basically anywhere, you're never going to find an air leak, or rarely anyway, in the middle of a wall or the middle of a floor or the middle of a ceiling. It's going to be where you've got an interface or a junction or some sort of penetration like that, okay? So that gives you kind of a good idea as to where you should focus in terms of sealing the building up. The next question we need to think about is, where do we put this vapor control layer? And what I want you to think about is, what we're trying to do is we're trying to minimize the risk of condensation in the building envelope. And think about the origin of that condensation. The origin of that moisture is going to be typically in a heating dominated climate. It's going to be on the inside, on the inside you're cooking, you're washing, whatever, you're breathing, and all of this moisture vapor is being given off. So you can see the red dotted line here. This is where we would put our air tightness and vapor control layer. And the whole idea of that is to prevent moisture vapor leaking into the building fabric and condensing. You can see the dew point there on the wall cross section. That's the location in that wall, given the weather conditions we've set up, where condensation could form. So we've got to basically minimize that. Now let's be very clear here. This vapor control layer we're talking about is not a sheet of plastic. Okay, you wouldn't put a plastic bag over your head. You shouldn't put a plastic bag over your building either. So these are specialist membranes, right, that actually allow a little bit of vapor movement, because we don't want to trap vapor in the assembly, but they literally control the amount of vapor moving in either direction, by the way, and we'll explain that a little bit down the line. But basically, in a heating dominated climate, to come to a conclusion here, you would put the air tightness and vapor control layer on the warm side, in other words on the inside of the insulation. If we move to a hot and humid climate, for example Florida, it's just an area I'm quite familiar with, in that case the risk of moisture vapor is actually on the outside of the building, not the inside. Sure enough, on the inside you're still washing and cooking and so forth, right? But actually it's often so hot and humid on the outside, there's so much moisture vapor in the air, that if that moisture vapor can leak in through your wall, then there's a great possibility that it could condense again in the middle of the wall and create all sorts of problems, right? So in a hot and humid climate, we generally see the air tightness and vapor control on the outside. In a heating dominated climate, it's generally on the inside.